Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Canadian Story. I'm here with my co-host, Zach Gerber, who also happens to be my cousin and close friend, and one of my very closest friends in the world, a confidant, current life coach. Welcome to the show, Matt Enns.
Thank you, sir. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
So I'm really excited for this episode because for those who don't know, this is one of the men who I have spent the most time in my life talking about life with and building my own model and map of meaning, maybe as Jordan Peterson would call it. Since I was 18, we've been friends. So I guess 15 years now, which is insane. Matt, you have gone on a very interesting journey through your life. Why don't you share with the listeners a little bit about your story before we go into what you're doing now?
Okay. So my pre-career story.
Yes. Well, you're before this career story, you still had a career.
Yeah. Okay. So you want me to start with my last career?
Sure. Or just start with like where you think people need to know your story. Where does it start being important for people to know, right? Obviously your whole story is important to you.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. My story as pertains to this podcast starts when I was, a handful of years into my career at RBC Dominion Securities, which is kind of the leading investment management firm in Canada. And, we punch above our weight since we have an oligopolistic banking system. So it's actually the fifth largest wealth management firm in the world. And I was struggling along there and I was doing well. I was making good money, but I was kind of just hitting my targets, just getting by. And while I was, in the midst of that and in the grind of cold calling and hosting seminars and trying to build up a clientele from zero clients to, to a substantial client base, my personal life was deteriorating pretty quickly. It wasn't necessarily that anything got worse in my personal life. It was just that all of the things that you can get away with in, adolescence and even in early adulthood, when you've got a wife and a child and a serious career, those things start catching up to you. And I'll skip a little bit of that. Basically, in order to save my marriage, I moved from Ottawa to Vancouver. And so I had to give up about half of what I'd built so far in the 6-7 years that I've been working at my career, which I'd worked insanely hard to build. And I went through a time of just incredibly deep personal transformation. I was separated from my wife. My alcoholism, which had been around for a long, long time, was getting much worse. And COVID hit and the world started to fall apart. So it was just this confluence of events, like all at the same time. And as it always feels when you're in the midst of a really dark time in your life, it all felt like everything was pointed, all the darkness was pointed directly at me. But I used that time, and especially the time I got to be at home and the time I got to be alone, to really work on myself. And as I was doing this, my life began to change really, really rapidly. I scaled my business in Vancouver for what took me 7 years in Ottawa to build. I built that exact same amount in about 18 months in Vancouver. So I added, that would have been adding about just over $100,000 to my income in 18 months, which, that took me a long time to build up the first time. I stopped drinking. I started exercising. I started having a daily routine. I started to take responsibility for my life, which started in very, very small ways, but built over time into something that I'm really proud of now. But I had to start that journey by being comfortable being ashamed of myself. And
okay, I want to go into that. a little bit. Okay. Explain to us what you mean by being comfortable being ashamed of yourself.
Yeah. When your life is off track to the degree that mine was off track, it's very hard to point at, one single thing that you can say, this is where I really went wrong. But one of the major, if not the primary causal factors was I had to look a certain way in the eyes of other people so that I could see the image of myself that I wanted to see reflected back to me. And when that's the way you operate, when your self-image is based entirely on how other people view you, you're not being honest about who you are and how you conduct yourself in the world. And so everything is focused on presenting a certain image. And in that image, there was no space for me not being good at things. So I had to be very, very good at everything all of the time, including the things that I wasn't good at. And so in order to actually, you mentioned Jordan Peterson earlier. I don't know if that was before we were filming or not. But in order to become the hero, you have to first be the fool, right? You have to be willing to be bad at something in order to become good at it. And since I had never done that in my whole life, or I hadn't done that probably since about puberty, I hadn't been getting good at very many things since puberty. When you're a kid, you learn everything and you're trying everything, but I kind of stopped that because I had this need to be good at things. And so being willing to be bad and admitting to myself and the rest of the world that, like, hey, I have really large shortcomings and I've worked for the last 15, 20 years to hide them from everybody that I know. But I'm okay to admit that now. That enabled me to start cleaning the slate, to create that blank slate, to begin rebuilding into somebody that I'd be proud of.
So I think this is going to be really interesting for our listeners. It was super interesting for me, and I'll share a little private story. I was going through a rough patch in my life, and Matt isn't just someone who's helped me professionally, but he's just been one of my best friends. So I called him and we were having a conversation about the fact that I struggled to do laundry. And that might sound ridiculous to people. It sounds ridiculous to Matt too sometimes. He's like, how can you not be able to do this? But we were having this conversation. And he said, David, the problem is that you think laundry should be easy, but laundry is actually quite a complex task. And you're a white belt at doing laundry. You've never really done it. I've kind of done it through my life, but honestly, it's something I'm ashamed of. It's not the thing that I've been very good at maintaining in my life. And he's like, your problem is you want to be a black belt at laundry, but you don't want to put the work of learning how to do laundry. You need to break laundry into these bite-sized tasks and then do that and get good at each of those. And eventually you'll just get good at doing laundry. And he's like, your problem is you're a white belt at laundry. And I just loved that analogy because that wasn't the catalyst for a lot of the change that I've experienced in my life, but it was a guidepost along the way of that. And as he and I have talked through and dug through my personal journey, because of the journey you went on, Matt, it's helped my journey. So why don't you share a little bit of like what the very beginning of that journey was like for you in a practical sense for people, so they can engage with the theory in a way that makes sense to them? Because we hear a lot about, oh, you can fix your life, change your life, but you genuinely did it. I watched you do it. I was a heavy drinker. You were a heavy drinker. We were heavy drinkers together and very good friends. And neither of us are heavy drinkers anymore. I don't drink at all. You haven't drank in a long time. What changed?
Yeah. So the very first thing that changed was I heard something actually began by Jordan Peterson. And he said, if you've got a memory that's older than about 18 months that you still have a strong emotional reaction to, it's because basically you haven't learned everything from that memory that you need to learn. And this was at a time in my life where I was experiencing intense social anxiety, to the point where talking to my wife, my then girlfriend, on the phone could cause me to choke up like I was talking in front of a million people, and I got stage fright and couldn't speak anymore. So my social anxiety was off the charts. And so I thought, okay, well, every memory that I have causes an emotional reaction for me. I better start going through them. And as you can imagine, when that's the kind of state that you're in, you're not really sleeping well. And so I was taking edible marijuana to try to fall asleep. And basically I was trying to sedate myself. And so I was taking pretty heavy doses. And when you do that and you ask yourself honestly, why did I have an emotional reaction to that memory? You're going to get an answer, and it's not going to be an answer you want. And you're not going to be able to ignore the answer that you get. And I just decided, like, I'm not going to distract myself. I'm not going to look away. I'm going to encounter every one of these memories that causes me, fear, shame, anxiety, panic. And I'm going to figure out why that is. And so I started doing that with memories, and then I started doing it with current experiences. And then I started doing it basically any time in my life where things went off, where I had a bad encounter with my wife, or I did something that I wasn't proud of, or I got off the phone with a client and I didn't feel great about it and I was kind of squeamish. I would ask honestly, why do I feel that way? Why am I having this negative reaction? And I got a whole lot of horrible answers that I really didn't want to get for a really, really long time. And it took me 6 months to basically get through like the very, very worst of it. And it took me a full 18 months until I was through like the main stuff. It took me 18 months of every single night for like a half hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, going through every single memory that I could, every part of my day in as much detail as I could, and being honest about what was actually happening there and where was I not being honest? Where was I lying to myself? Where was I pretending to be this? Where was I lacking integrity? Where was I trying to show off instead of being honest? And by the end of that 18 months, it was very destabilizing. It's not something I recommend doing. I almost had like a personality break. But by the end of that 18 months, what I was left with was really me. And so things didn't get better, for another couple of years after that. But at least at that point, they stopped getting worse. And I began to rebuild based on honesty, based on truth, based on a vision of a life, and not even a vision of a life that I wanted at that point, because I didn't know what I wanted, but at least a vision that I wasn't going to keep doing things like before. And so from that small part of me that was left over, I began to rebuild.
So you're rebuilding. You're at the process where you've gone into your soul, into the like you and I've talked about, that dark region, that forest of your inner life, and you've looked at the lies that you've been hiding behind because they give you a sense of identity.
Yeah.
Right. And you've busted through that. And like, that is the first step. And a lot of people never take that first step. But after that first step, how do you become good at something? Like, 'cause this is something that you've taught me through a number of other friendships, but you've been the clearest sensei I've had on this. Is people don't know how to learn things anymore. So you've discovered how to learn things. Mm-hmm. Others have. We've had Drew Weatherhead on the podcast, other people who love this concept. Share with us the revelation of how to get good at things that you've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things that you have to have in place before you can actually succeed at learning, and we can maybe get into those later in the podcast. But that's your why you actually want to learn it, and your vision of what life will look like once you do learn it, right? Because those are the things that sustain you through the hard time of learning and through being bad at things. But what learning something really takes is the patience with yourself to be bad at something, and to just keep being bad at it, hopefully to a lesser and lesser degree, until all of a sudden you start to be good at it. And that's why I have a 90-day program that I take people through to help find their career purpose in life. And around week 4 or 5, I usually encourage them to do a martial art. And it doesn't really matter which martial art it is. It just has to be a sparring martial art. So jiu-jitsu, wrestling, kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever. And the reason is, when you're doing a sparring martial art, and I usually recommend Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you're getting immediate feedback from reality itself. Like, you're not good at this. And if you think you can just go in there, and especially in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and get by on your athletic prowess or your size or your strength, you're in for a very, very rude awakening. And you will keep being rudely awakened in the form of being choked or arm locked or tapped out over and over and over again, until you begin to align your understanding of the world with reality. And every time you step out of that and you think you're better than you are, you think, oh, I tapped out the new guy, now I'm good at jiu-jitsu, you will get smashed right away, and you'll get brought back into reality. And you will have to accept, okay, I now have a roughly accurate view of my ability. And because of that, I can actually begin to progress at a reasonable pace towards the goal, rather than thinking you can shortcut or get there quickly. Or on the other hand, thinking, oh, I'm bad, so I might as well quit. Because in sparring martial arts, especially in jiu-jitsu, anybody else who just started, they're also bad. So you don't, you lose any idea that you're special, either special that you can get there quicker, or special that you're uniquely bad at something.
Right. Yeah. I love this alignment with reality. You talk about that a lot. You talk about being honest, breaking down your inner self to the point of realizing who you actually were. And the things that were left that you were being honest about, those were who you were. Mm-hmm. How did jiu-jitsu play a role in that? Because I think you have an interesting perspective on that too. It's what you're describing about, being okay with failing, in a sense, is the same thing that, like, learning is being okay with failing. Being a good learner is saying, okay, I'm going to be bad for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. How do those two things bring some synergy into those two ideas? Because I think they have a lot of synergy.
So from jiu-jitsu and being bad at things?
Yeah. And this whole going into yourself and breaking yourself down to the truth.
Yeah. I mean, we all have an idea of who we are that we want everybody else to reflect back to us. No matter how much self-development you've done, that still remains. And if you've done very little self-development, that's a huge element of who you are. And that's part of why, in spite of always being drawn to combat sports and watching the UFC and fight movies and everything like that, I never stepped foot into a dojo really until I was 29, because, and I didn't realize this at the time, obviously, but I didn't want my self-image of me as like this fighter guy to meet reality and be crushed, right? Which meant I never actually became good at fighting. it always just remained an interest that I somehow thought was a part of my identity, but it was never connected to it. So, but by willing to be bad at it, and by willing to go and get tapped out and be the brand new guy in the room, and not the brand new guy in the room who might be the worst guy for the next month or two, the brand new guy in the room who some guys I will never catch up to, and some guys I might be able to catch up to in 5 or 10 years. Right. So it's like, I really had to be bad, and I had to accept that if I want to be good at something, the point isn't just to structure your life in such a way that you can appear to be good at something, because people do that, right? And there are certain martial arts where you can get a black belt pretty quickly, and you can tell all your friends you're a black belt, and you can feel really good about your ability to, I'm a really good fighter, but there's no sparring and there's no feedback from reality itself. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, it's like, you have to accept, if I actually want to be good at this, I will get hurt. I will be bad. I will be humiliated. It will be hard. And it will be a very fucking long time before I'm actually good at this.
Yeah.
And when you have that shift in the paradigm, through which you view the world, it affects everything else that you do. So, in this career that I'm starting now, when I started the first iteration of my first career, about 10 years ago, I tried to appear good to everybody. I tried to appear to everybody like I was really, really good at it from day one. And then I didn't actually focus on getting good at it. It wasn't until the second round of that career where I said, okay, I don't really care who thinks I'm good or bad at this career. I just want to actually be really good at it. And the only reason that paradigm shift happened was because of jiu-jitsu and because of these exercises I've been taking myself through to basically face the pain of acknowledging where who I was did not align with reality.
I want to go deeper into this concept because it has a lot to do with identity, which is something you work a lot on with your clients, because identity, I think, is a big cultural problem that we're facing as a society, right? It's this idea that your identity is attached to some external thing. And a lot of what you teach people is, no, that can't be. And as long as your identity is attached to external things, you are never going to be in control of your own. You're not going to be sovereign over yourself, right? So why do you think people attach their identity to things that are external from their own performance? Like, for example, you seeing yourself as this fighting guy when you never really learned how to fight.
I just lost a bunch of bar fights when I was too drunk.
Yeah.
That was
Right.
that was the entirety of my experience. Yeah. Can you rephrase that question?
I guess the question is on identity, right? And it's that a lot of people have their identity external to themselves. So whether it's their sexuality or it's their, fandom of something, or it's their religion or something, their identity is attached to something external from themselves. And your teaching is that, or what you're trying to teach people is that is not the right way to go about things. So I was hoping you could share about why you believe that. Why is it wrong to do that?
I don't know if it's wrong to do that. It just signals that you have a lack of confidence and trust in yourself, and that you lack a compelling vision yourself. Because if you go around seeking other people's approval rather than seeking your own approval, by definition, that's because you value their own approval more highly than you view your own, right? And usually when somebody doesn't value their own opinion of themselves, they have a legitimate reason not to. Right. It's like,
right. I love that. Wow. That is good. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, even if you're successful on the outside, but you lack that self-confidence, and you're still, either a social chameleon, or you're always seeking approval from people, or you're seeking validation through external means, like, having lots of money or having a fancy car. That's an indication that you don't have trust in who you are. And so you have an image of all these people, which maybe approximates who they are, but it's really just, the image that you have of them that's filtered by what they actually show to you. And then that's further filtered by your own insecurities painting a picture of them, right? So you have this fictional idea of all these people around you, and you need them to accept the fictional idea of who you are, right? And that's often, like I mentioned, done through external things like how you look, what car you drive, what house you have, what career you have. And the way to change that is to begin to, number one, be honest with yourself and say, okay, why don't I respect myself enough? And if you ask yourself that question, especially if you do it on a heavy dose of edibles when your life is in absolute shambles, like, you'll get an answer, and you will not like the answer that you get.
Okay, give us an example. What was one of the answers you got?
Oh, I mean, this was kind of like a meta answer. There's a bunch of little answers underneath it, but I wasn't that good at anything. And I had this self-image, this frail, shallow, superficial self-image that I was really good at everything, right? And I could maintain that to a greater or lesser degree, depending on who I was with and how close I was to them. But it wasn't because I actually believed I was good at these things, right? It was because I developed the skill of appearing good at things. And so even when I would study things, I was studying them so that I would be able to talk about them and show how I was an expert on this thing. It wasn't a genuine desire to become an expert on a thing, right?
Oh, interesting.
It was still external, not yet internal.
100%. Yeah. And that's not to say that's all bad, because I mean, everybody who wants to get in good shape, they all start getting in good shape because they want to look a certain way. They want to, they want to look skinnier, or they want to be more beautiful, or they want to be more jacked. And that's fine, because as you do that and as you develop those habits, you begin to develop the self-respect that goes along with looking the way that you want to look. You begin to develop the self-respect of having the discipline of going to the gym or of eating a strict diet or whatever. So it's not to say that, being outwardly focused is always a bad thing, but it's something that you definitely want to be able to progress beyond, because when you do that and you develop a vision for yourself and you say, okay, I was trying to impress all these people and be all these things so that I would have Zach look at me and think I was wealthy, and I'd have David look at me and think I was smart. And then I can, feel good about being wealthy and smart, irrespective of the money in my bank account, irrespective of, how much I actually learned and how much I actually know.
It's cheap. It's
cheap.
A fast food of validation.
That's right. Yeah, it's a black belt in a martial art where you've never once sparred, but you think you can kick everybody else's ass, right? And so yeah, you did have to do some work to get there, but not necessarily the work that indicates whether or not you actually have the skill you possess, right? And as you go through this transformative process and you say, okay, why do I not respect myself? Then if you really want to get honest, once you go through that whole, that dissolution of who you used to be, then you say, okay, what would I have to do to actually become the person that I want to become? And you go, oh shit, like that's a long list. And so you start, making it bite-sized, you start working on those things. And all of a sudden, as you fail your way upwards slowly over time, you all of a sudden get to a point where you go, I'm not really proud of myself, but like, I'm kind of proud of that. And like, well, I'm not ashamed anymore. And then as you start feeling that way, you start being more honest and more transparent in dialogue, because you're not trying to hide who you are and present a facade. You're actually becoming okay with who you are, so you don't feel the need to hide it anymore. And if you continue doing that, and then, on a self-development level or on a consciousness level, you progress from white belt to maybe blue belt to maybe purple belt or wherever you go, then all of a sudden you really begin to respect yourself, and you start to value your opinion more than other people, because you deserve respect, because you're doing the things that you value, and you're putting in the work, and you're having the discipline, and you're maintaining the consistency. And sort of what comes out of that process, but what also happens simultaneously with that process, is you begin to put together a vision for your life based on the things that matter to you. Whereas before, everything else was what matters to David, what matters to Zach, what matters to my parents, what matters to my teachers, what matters, in the media. You start saying, well, what actually matters to me? And then when you bump up against somebody with a competing vision, and that person says, oh, I expect you to be in this career, to have, these external social markers of status in order for me to respect you, that doesn't matter to you so much, because you have your own markers, your own internal standards that you're comparing yourself to primarily. And when you do that and you're proud of that, if you bump up against somebody with a different vision of who you're supposed to be, it doesn't matter to you so much. And if you keep going through it, you stop even noticing that, because it really, really ceases to matter to you. And I think that's part of the process of switching from that external locus of self-worth to that internal locus of self-worth.
Oh, I love it.
This whole journey of changing your entire life, at least for you, and I would speculate that it would be the same for most people, as far as I can tell, starts with being honest with yourself. Why do you think that is so hard for us?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but speaking from personal opinion, being honest with yourself, this is obvious, but I'm going to say it. It begins with looking at all the lies you've been telling to yourself, right? And we think, let's just use a really easy one. It's like, okay, I want to present an image to everybody that I'm amazing with women, but I haven't had a girlfriend in 9 years, right? But I have the occasional picture I take with girls at the bar, and I can put them on my Instagram, and I create this image. we think being honest is just admitting an objective fact. And then you say, oh, okay, well, obviously I'm actually not good with women. But what it really is it's saying, you know what? I'm a liar. I need other people's approval. I don't value myself enough to be honest about who I am. Women don't find me attractive. I'm a coward and I hide from everything. I have this idea of myself that I'm, maybe smart enough or successful enough or attractive enough to be successful with women. And yet that's actually not true. I'm not that attractive. I'm not that successful. I'm not that good with women. And so it's this very, very destabilizing process of saying the lens through which I view the world is fundamentally flawed and I can't trust myself. And maybe I actually have no fucking clue who I am. And so, well, you think it's like, okay, I'm correcting one little thing about, one objective fact that's really obvious if you just look at it on the surface. What you're actually doing is saying like, I'm deeply flawed and maybe I'm even broken and incapable of navigating the simplest things in the world. And that's a super like laundry, right? And admitting like, I have this idea of myself as like this conquering powerful man, and yet like my dirty underwear beat me every day, right? Like that's a hard thing to admit to yourself because there's a lot that goes with that admission.
Yeah, it unearths the dragon from under the rug as soon as you take one thing and you say, okay, well, if that isn't true, why is it not true? Oh, these 12 reasons.
Oh, there's an army of dragons under there.
Yeah, that got like way big, way fast.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's
exactly.
terrifying. That's terrifying. Yeah. So for you on your own personal journey, you said it really took you about 18 months of like looking at those dragons, right? To kind of come to terms with who you actually are. And there's something else Peterson keeps coming up in this conversation. There's an exercise. He says voluntary exposure to what you're afraid of makes you less afraid of it, right? So you're voluntarily exposing yourself to those things within your personality or your being that you aren't proud of. So that was, you would say, an 18-month journey. When you kind of landed at, okay, this is me, what happened next?
Great question. When I finally landed at this is me, what happened next? Well, this was right in the thick of COVID. And it was right when the vaccine mandate had come out and employers were beginning to say, you have to get vaccinated. So it was right in the middle of that. And I'd been coming into myself and figuring out who I was for, maybe a year or two at that point to a greater or lesser degree. And I had to deliberate, am I going to take this medical procedure that I am not in favor of, that I don't want to take, that I have, let's just say, doubts about its efficacy, to say the very least. Do I have to take this because that's the external expectation of me?
Well, not just that, your job was demanding it of you too.
That's what I mean. And it's like, okay, so when I was talking this through with my wife, like, well, I now have a vision of who I'm going to be and how I make decisions. And how I make decisions isn't under duress for threat of being fired or for not being able to go socialize. How I make decisions is based on what I believe is congruent with who I am, who I'm meant to be, and what I'm supposed to do in the world. And I talked to my wife, and we're like, I was making really good money. I was making a couple $100,000. I was about to double or triple that because I had an opportunity at the office that I was supposed to take over. And so I'd finally, I was about to break through to the place in my career that I'd always wanted to be, while simultaneously starting to acknowledge I didn't actually know if I wanted to do this forever. But I said, if I say no to this, there's a very good chance I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my income. We're a single income family. My wife is at home with the kids, and we're going to be in like a very serious situation here. But thank God I have a supportive wife, and she encouraged me to stay true to what I wanted to do. And I made a decision that I went in to talk to my manager, who's an amazing guy, and I said, look, here's where I'm at. I'm unwilling to do this, and I'm willing to bear the consequences. And that was the first time in my life where I had really taken a stand that was super, super counter basically everybody I know and everybody who had expectations of me and all of society and all of media, basically the entire known world outside of my small circle of friends who, maybe understood my perspective or shared it. And doing so was this incredibly strengthening experience where I discovered in that moment that I had this deep well of courage and fortitude that I didn't previously know I had. And that was only available to me because I started to be in integrity with that part of me. And once I started doing that, there was really no looking back. And I think, when people talk about the conscious, or Socrates talks about the daemon, like, I think that's the part of ourselves that we're talking to, that part of ourselves, that deep down part of ourselves, that if we live in integrity with that, you can do no other thing. And so it wasn't a difficult decision to make. I mean, it was a difficult decision, but it wasn't like I had to drag myself into the office. It was like, I can't not do this thing, because that's out of congruence with who I am at the deepest level that I've yet discovered. And making that decision and realizing the strength that was found there made it for me impossible to go back to living a different way. And so I started to build the rest of my life in the same way and say, okay, how can I build my entire existence? And the same way I did with going through my painful memories, how can I go through every single area of my life, like audit my friendships, audit obviously my business and my income, my career, audit where I live, my geography, my activities, audit all of that, and then put that through the filter of who I am at the deepest level and bring that all into congruence. And as I did that, my external world shifted just absolutely dramatically.
Yeah. Obviously, I'll preface this next question with, you're not a doctor, but do you think the marijuana aided your journey through that, we'll call it the dark night of the soul? Joe Rogan talks about this all the time, about people getting high. He's like, I don't get the people who like get high and get paranoid. He's like, that's good. You should look at that. That means you should look at that thing that you're paranoid about. Like, that's a good thing. Listen to that. Do you think you would have had the same journey had you not been doing high dose marijuana?
No, definitely not. And I'm definitely not recommending it. Like I said, like I think I basically had a personality break, and that could end very, very badly for somebody. So, maybe try it a few times, but definitely not like every day for 18 months in high doses. It's a terrible idea. But similar to like psilocybin mushrooms, which I have some experience with, like Joe Rogan said about the paranoia. It's like, if you meet a demon when you're on psilocybin mushrooms and you try to run away, like, that's going to be the rest of your trip for the next 2-3 hours is going to be running from that demon, and it's going to be horrible and horrific. But if you confront the demon and dialogue with the demon, you'll quickly realize that demon turns into something absurd, like a little fluffy bunny or something. And that's the same way with problems in real life. It's like, and that's that psychotherapeutic principle of like, exposure to exposure in progressive degrees to the things that you're afraid of. If you do that, those dragons cease to be such terrifying dragons. And there's so many myths and children's stories about this, right? And they all come down to something similar, which is like, once you have the name of the beast, then you can attack the beast. Like, there's this unknown beast attacking the village and it's destroying everything. But as soon as one kid learns what the name of the beast is, then they can go attack it, and it's no longer an indomitable foe, right? And I think that principle definitely holds true in real life. And if you take, cannabis or other plant medicines, they can, like I said, they can take you in one direction or the other, and it can be very, very destabilizing. So I don't recommend it necessarily. But for me, the amount of progress that I made in such a short period of time, that would have probably taken me 5 or 10 years to do without that, if I did it at all. Because I would have turned away from those thoughts that I wasn't able to turn away from in that state.
That's incredible. Would you say, so you go into your manager and you say, I'm not going to take this thing. I'm sorry, I'm willing to suffer the consequences. That was a big decision to make. Would you attribute the strength that you found in that moment to the strength that you had built up over those 18 months looking at those individual dragons?
Yeah, definitely. That's part of it. So part of it was developing this habit. And again, it's, just through repetition, same as lifting weights, same as going to jiu-jitsu. It's like repetitions. And I developed a habit and a resiliency of looking at the things I don't want to look at, and of going through the processes that I don't want to go through. Right. And I'd already been doing, to one degree or another, not like I do now, but to an increasing degree, like developing a strict daily routine of like never eating certain foods, always doing certain habits, always waking up at a particular time, having a bedtime routine. And when you do things 15, 20, 50 times a day, every single day, that you don't want to do, when something comes along that you should do and you don't want to do it, your instinct isn't to say, oh, I don't want to do that, I'm going to cower away from it and go into prey mode. Your instinct is to say, oh, I better run towards that and go into predator mode. Mm-hmm. And that said, as somebody who, like, that was not the way I operated for the first 30 years of my life, like not almost ever, except maybe in the case of like protecting my wife and kids or something. But like I did not run towards problems. I pretended they didn't exist and papered them away with fancy words. But it's a learnable skill. And so when that came up, I had already developed that skill where I've been doing it for long enough that my habit was to run towards the thing I didn't want to run towards rather than run away from it.
Man, that's incredible. Can you brief us on a little bit about your daily routine?
Yeah. This is something that I take all of my clients through within the first few weeks of the program. And the principle that I always teach is like the principle of minimal progression. And so figure out a morning routine that would make you proud, as silly and small as it is, and then start there and then build on it. It's the same thing. It's like be a white belt. So a lot of people say, well, I want to wake up at 5 a.m. every day, go to the gym for 90 minutes. Then it's like, okay, like slow down. What time do you wake up now? I wake up between 9 and 11:30, depending on the day. It's like, okay, and you're going to start waking up at 5 a.m. every single day. It's like, no. What's the minimum wake up time that if you did it every single day for a week, as pathetic as you are, you'd feel somewhat proud of it? You're like, well, I don't know if I could wake up at like 8:30 every day. I guess I feel pretty good about that. It's okay. Start there. Start waking up at 8:30 every day for a week. See how it goes, and then after a week, you can move it up earlier. And so that's how I did it in my life. Not because I had this developed as a tactic back then, but that's just because the only way it worked for me. And so I built up to this over a long time. But now what I do, I get up at 6:30. This isn't something that I think is ideal, but I turn the brightness all the way up on my phone and I blast my eyes with my bright phone, and I go on my phone for about 10-15 minutes. Not what I recommend, but I have a horrible time waking up in the morning, and that just helps me be alert and actually wake up for the day. So that's what I do. Not ideal. I go to the gym every single day. I never don't go to the gym. And then I come home, and depending whether my kids are in school or not, my routine has to change. But I try to spend 1 to 2 hours in really deep work on the things that are most important. So Sunday evenings, I outline everything I have to do for the week. I prioritize all of those tasks. And then I figure out, and I put them in my calendar in time blocks, 9 to 9:30, 9:30 to 11 throughout the week. And so I begin working on whatever's in my calendar. And usually I have the most important stuff, trying to get it done first in the day when there's no distractions, when everyone else is still, in bed or getting up. Then work throughout the day. My evening routine is putting the kids, I don't have like a very complex evening routine anymore. I put the kids to bed. I review my day. And I plan out my day tomorrow because I want to be communicating to my subconscious before I go to bed what it needs to be working on overnight. I do a little bit of reading or watch a little bit of mindless TV. I have like blue light glasses. I put those on an hour or two before bed. And that's it. Yeah, I basically put my kids to bed and go straight to bed. And then other than that, the big thing that I do, I try to keep my routines as like super hyper simple as possible, is I eat a very, very strict diet. And this is partly because I have autoimmune issues that I didn't realize were part of all the problems I had the first 30 years of my life, but also because this is just how I function optimally. So I eat the same thing every single day with very little variation. I eat 2 or 3 ribeye steaks, and I eat about a half cup to a cup of fruit, and I eat a couple teaspoons or tablespoons of honey, raw honey. And I eat the exact same thing every single day with, I might, have a different type of steak, or I'll have ground beef instead, or I'll have elk, but it's the same thing. It's like red meat, a tiny bit of fruit, a couple tablespoons of honey and water, and then green tea. And I literally never eat anything else ever under any circumstance.
That's crazy. Did you get that? Where did you get the like very carnivore heavy diet from? Like, who advised you on that?
Well, I stopped, and this kind of goes back to the theme of sovereignty, which is everything that I try to direct my life through. My healthcare was subservient to medical professionals for the first 20 years of my life. And I didn't have a single problem during that entire time that ever got solved. And so from the age of about late teens, 20, I began to take control back of my healthcare. The first thing I did was I eliminated dairy, because somebody had this crazy theory that it might be causing my stomach problems, not a medical doctor, someone else. So I did that, and I stopped going to the hospital for my stomach. I stopped having irritable bowel syndrome. I stopped being in crippling pain with my stomach. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. And I stopped kind of going to doctors at that point. And then a few years after that, I started going paleo. So I've been paleo for like 12, 13, 14 years. Meat and veggies, basically, and fruit, nuts. And then I kept just eliminating things. I eliminated gluten. And everything kept getting better, but nothing was totally solved. And I had, a list of dozens of ailments. I've slept on the floor for years because of back pain and migraines, skin issues, acne, dandruff, eczema, anxiety, depression, insomnia. I didn't sleep through the night really till maybe 2-3 years ago, including when I was an infant, when I was a young kid, when I was a teenager. And a couple of years ago, Jordan Peterson's daughter popularized the lion diet, which is just eating red meat. And I thought, well, she has a lot of problems that I have, just much worse. But even then I was like, that can't be it. But maybe, I'll just be stricter. And I started getting stricter. And then I started following along with more of these carnivore people who were eliminating even vegetables, which I thought was absolutely insane because I tried to eat as many vegetables as I could. I was eating, meat, veggies, fruit, nuts at this time. And when I eliminated vegetables, I started feeling even better. But I was also trying to go to the gym and put on weight at this time. So I was trying to get some carbs still. So I'd reintroduce rice once in a while. And the longer I went in between reintroducing rice or potatoes, I started noticing that I felt better when I didn't do that. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just give this all meat thing a try because that seems crazy. And when I did that, to my complete surprise, I started feeling like incredible. And I started sleeping through the night for the first time. And the big thing I noticed is like these kind of demonic voices in my head that I had my whole life, just like attacking me, attacking everybody I see, just breaking everything I saw down, including myself, my wife, my kids, everything. They went away for the first time ever. And I'd done like every kind of psychological work you could imagine. I'd done every dietary shift other than this one. I'd done every exercise, every breath work, every ice bath, like everything you could think of. And it turned out like it was fucking vegetables and potatoes that were making me have these symptoms of depression and anxiety. And since then, I've discovered like there's this enormous community online of people who experience the exact same thing. And fortunately for me, I can still eat like a small amount of fruit every day, which is nice to have the variety, but I don't really care. Like the way that I feel eating steak all day is so life-changing compared to how I felt the rest of my life. Like it's not hard for me at all anymore.
Man, we just pissed off so many vegans.
I know.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And the more you think about it, like you think, and not to offend any vegans, because I have some close friends who are vegans. But I mean, our digestive systems like just aren't built for it. And I was joking with my son today. I was feeding banana peels to the deer in our backyard. And I was joking, like I'm giving them vegan bacon because there's all those TikTok videos about like, putting soy sauce on banana peels and roasting them in the oven and making vegan bacon. And it's like, dude, our digestive systems, they are not the same as a deer, let me tell you. And like there's a lot of deer poop in my backyard. It's not the same as our poop. And yeah, the crazy idea that meat's bad for your health. I mean, there's lots of evidence you can point to that indicates how insane that belief is. But all of that evidence and everything aside, anecdotally, and I'm a big believer in anecdotal evidence, the personal transformation that I've undergone by eating just meat, for me at least, there's nothing I'm ever going to do differently than that, unless it's, my body starts being able to, I guess.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you think meat is bad for you and the environment, read The Sacred Cow. And I can't remember who wrote it off the top of my head, but it's a book called The Sacred Cow, and that'll set you straight.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, I got a few more
Yeah.
questions for you, Matt, because we still got 14 minutes here. There's more information I want the listeners to get from you. So 3 questions. First question, what are you doing now? Like, what are we kind of hinted at it. Give us the 3-minute, this is what I'm doing. And why are you excited about it? Yeah.
So part of this whole transformation process I went through when I decided like I might not be doing my old job anymore. And then eventually I decided, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I'm not going to do this anymore. I developed a bunch of processes to figure out like what my career purpose was meant to be. And for men and for women who have a strong masculine energy, your career in life and your purpose in life are not quite synonymous, but they're very, very interlinked and interwoven. And as I was developing these processes and borrowing other effective processes, I put myself through a ton of exercises, and I came out with at the end what I was supposed to do. And what I was supposed to do was coach people to go through the same transformative process that I had went through. And there are a whole bunch of technical reasons I chose that, but the driving sort of moral or spiritual reason was my life is so profoundly different on a second by second, molecule by molecule basis compared to how I lived the first 30 years of my life, that if I'm not sharing this with as many people as I possibly can, I am doing a disservice to the universe, to God. It's a waste. And so I started a coaching company, and the thing that I'm doing now, I have private clients who I work with on a one-on-one basis, and we work on, essentially whatever they want to work on. But the focus of my business is I have a 12-week program that helps people who aren't totally satisfied in their current job figure out what the hell they're supposed to do about that, whether that's reorient themselves so they can appreciate what they have and recommit to it, or whether that means transitioning to a new career, but in a way that doesn't sacrifice financial ambitions or hurt, their family's financial situation. So that's what I do now. And So I'm learning the whole social media thing because private clients one-on-one is great, but if you want to scale beyond, servicing 15 or 20 people one-on-one, you have to be on social media. So I'm learning to do content creation, and I'm teaching all the things that I love talking about. And yeah, it's insanely rewarding. I'm really, really good at it, which is important to me. I think for men and women with masculine energy, being good at your career, not just making money at it, is extremely important. So I'm thrilled to be doing something that I'm really, really good at. And it's just had these powerful ripple effects in the rest of my life, where my family, the city I live in, my kids, my friendships, my activities, my habits, like everything has been elevated massively just by that one simple thing of doing the thing that I'm meant to do.
Do you have a question on that, Zach?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a 12-week course. Can you just outline it? Obviously, we're not going to run the course here in this conversation, but what is it, if someone's interested in doing it, what approximately does it look like?
Yeah, so it's divided into roughly 3 chunks. The first chunk is mindset. So that's getting rid of limiting beliefs, starting to look at yourself honestly and admit where you're sabotaging, where you're holding yourself back. If you have beliefs about career or about money or about relationships that are causing these repeat negative patterns in your life. So it's really, excavating your subconscious for all those things that are holding you back. And then we begin to replace those with functional beliefs that are in alignment with the future you want, and with the daily habits that will get you there. And once we start the ball rolling on your daily habits, and it's different for everybody. So I don't say, here's how to work out, here's how to have a morning routine, here's how to journal. It's like we co-design the program for everybody so that their morning routine is the one that works for them. The type of exercise they do works for them. What they eat works for them. But we go through all of that until it's dialed in enough that they can begin to operate like the person they want to be. And once you start doing that, you start connecting to that deeper part of yourself. And then we can begin, instead of just pulling them out of hell, excavating them from these bad beliefs and these things that haven't been working for them and the career they haven't loved, we can begin to create a vision of heaven. And most people are running from hell. They don't want to be late for work because their boss will get mad at them. They don't want to skip work because they need to make the money, right? So they're running from hell. But if you can switch that into running towards heaven, it's like, well, instead of going to work because I'm afraid of getting fired, I'm going to go to work because I love what I do there and I love the impact that I have when I'm at the office. That's a very different thing. So we begin to put together a vision, and that's kind of the second part, a vision for their future. And once we have a really powerful vision so that their life is in alignment with their deeper self, their career is in alignment with the world that they want to see, and their career is something that enables them to express the things that they're very, very best at in a context that they find interesting and that they have passion about, then we spend time just basically A/B testing that whole thing. So A/B testing their routines, A/B testing, and the routines are anything, like I said, from what kind of food you're eating on a daily basis to what martial art you decide to do, which not everybody does, but I encourage people to do that. And then we A/B test that for a month until, by the end of the 12 weeks, you know who you are, you know where you want to go, you know how to get there, and you know how to iterate and improve upon your daily processes and rituals and habits and beliefs, and how to program yourself with new beliefs to continue, down on the journey towards, black belt.
Yeah, that seems to be the ticket, eh? The ritualization and commitment to habit of the small things that you do every day that can move the needle and move you forward. And it's a slow process, but it's about making it happen every day. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and people often think, okay, I want to get jacked, so I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lift heavy weights, and by the summer I'll be jacked. And it's like, well, you know what? It might take you a year or two to look the way you want to look. So don't try to get there so fast. But if you go to the gym for 6 weeks, you're not going to maybe look like a superstar, but you're going to look better than you look now. And won't that be exciting? Right? And maybe you don't have to start lifting 90 minutes twice a day, right? Why don't you just say, some people have literally started with wall push-ups, do 5 wall push-ups a day, go against the wall, and if push-ups from the ground are too hard, and do 5 wall push-ups a day, because 5 wall push-ups a day turns into 10, turns into 15, turns into 5 push-ups on the ground, turns into going to the gym and doing bench press, right? But you have to be honest about where you're at and your and what your capabilities are, so that you can begin to iterate and progress towards whatever goal you ultimately have.
Man, I'm always that guy. I'm always not patient guy, especially especially
Yeah.
when it comes to working out, man. I recently just started running, and I was like a week or two into it, and I was like, I'm just gonna like, I'll just crush 5K. I'll just go like right to 5K, and that'll be fine. And I hurt my knees, and I couldn't run for like 3 weeks, and it wasn't a good
Yeah.
idea. And now I'm getting up and I'm running, 2.5, 3K.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. And you have to, that's the A/B testing part. Like, okay, that was too much. Okay,
Yeah.
that was too easy and I didn't really feel good after I did it because it was too easy. I wasn't proud of it. Okay, we have to do more, right? And you just, you learn things as you, bust your knees and throw your hips out. You figure these things out.
And it's okay to fail forward, right?
It's the only way. It's the only way.
So-
And if you're not failing at least 20% of the time, you're not pushing hard enough.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
That's cool. If you're not, sorry, go ahead,
So
David.
what have you from entering this new career? You've entered this new career. You're doing this new thing. You're getting all this fulfillment. You're seeing ripple effects through your life. I've seen your life transform, right? Like the person you are now versus the person who was hacking at Dominion Securities at the very beginning with a new baby and a new wife, and it's a very different man, right? So you've walked down a road. And I think even the people who went to university with you, everyone who knows you has seen this progression, and it's been a self-guided tour in a lot of ways. Obviously, lots of intelligent people that you've gleaned information from.
Mm-hmm.
What's been the most fulfilling part of this new career for you?
If I was to think about something specific, it's those breakthroughs that I have with private clients. And there is always a moment, and it depends on the client. Sometimes it's like first session we have together, because especially with my private clients, I spend a lot of time one-on-one. And sometimes it takes till the third, fourth, fifth one. But at some point there's this breakthrough, and I've done this enough to know, okay, that breakthrough means you're now permanently transformed. This isn't like, oh, this habit has shifted. Like, who you are has shifted to a different plane of existence, and everything is going to be different for you from now on. And I know that moment. I can recognize that moment. I can see it in my clients' eyes and how they talk and their body language. And when we get to that moment, that's an incredible feeling for me. That's what every new client that I get, that's the moment I'm excited.
You're chasing that. You're chasing that.
Yeah. And we've had moments like that together, you and I.
Absolutely. Oh yes. No, I was wondering what it was like from your side, right? Because from my side, obviously I know, but like, what is the moment that you chase? Because I think in the improvement game, we'll call it, in the quest for enlightenment, there's lots of names for it, on the road to redemption, we always have these signposts, right? Of, oh, actually you've made it somewhere, you've achieved something, you've come to a realization. And I think a lot of people, they don't trust those signposts. It's like you were saying, but you've been through enough to know actually when it's a signpost and where it's pointing, and you have faith in it. You're saying, no, actually, this is going to change them forever, right? And I think even when you're going through it, maybe as someone who's dealing with baggage or whatever, you could sometimes be like, well, am I going to be different forever? But right? Because you know what that thing is going to shift, that lie being gone means. But people don't know what it means because they haven't thought through these things like you have. Can you share a little bit of like what getting rid of a self-limiting lie has done from your perspective for people? And maybe I'll share one of the self-limiting lies that I had, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, this is one that is not specific to any one client, but I've dealt with multiple clients. And this is something that everybody will be able to relate to on some level, whether personally or from somebody that they know. It's like, I have my drinking under control. It doesn't affect my life in a negative way. Right? And that's the single belief that enables you to keep drinking every day. And even if it doesn't mean you're going out and getting in fights and getting arrested and, really screwing up your life, if it just means you're a little bit less present with your kids, you leave the office a little bit earlier and don't do that tasks you should do. You're a little bit less respectful and appreciative to your wife than you could be. You are a little bit less productive at home, and you're not, maybe you'd be cleaning the dishes otherwise, but instead you watch an episode of TV because you're having a beer and it feels better, right? And you're training yourself to be self-indulgent and to escape problems rather than face them and handle that stress and get better at handling stress, right? But everybody who drinks regularly has this lie they tell themselves, which is, it's not really affecting my life in a negative way. The stress release I get from it is a great benefit, whatever they tell themselves. And you can see when that shifts with somebody, when they go from trying to quit drinking and it's really hard and they really want to drink, to all of a sudden saying, I don't want to drink anymore. Like I just don't want to. And that's a very different thing. And that's why, as incredible as AA is, Alcoholics Anonymous, that's the one thing where I think they miss is like people have to keep telling themselves over and over again, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic. It's like maybe for somebody who hasn't gone through that shift, that's what they need to hear to keep reminding themselves not to return to hell. But for somebody who has a vision of heaven and they don't want to go back to hell anymore and they really truly get it, that's a shift where it's like, I don't try not to drink anymore. It's not hard to be around alcohol. I taste my wife's drinks if they look interesting and they're like, I have a frog in my throat and I'm dry throated and she has wine nearby. I'll have a little sip of wine. And it's not difficult for me because I don't want to do that anymore. That's a shift that I've undergone. It's not something that I'm trying desperately to not do anymore.
You don't want to. It's out of your life.
I don't want to. Yeah.
I love the reorientation of stop running from the negative and start chasing the positive. It's the running from hell versus running toward heaven. I hadn't thought about that before. I don't, that's a comment and not a question. And it's kind of a dead end.
I love that
in that sense, but that's a cool paradigm shift that I haven't thought about before.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we were discussing this today, Matt, where it was like, for me, I think most of my life has been driven by running from hell, right? And my hell maybe has been differently defined than other people's, and that's forced me to push myself harder in different directions. But you can't actually go towards your heaven, this is what you said today, until you're out of hell. Like you can't be in hell, which often is self-imposed mental state. Let's be frank here. Until you can't actually direct yourself to heaven until you're out of the fire.
Yeah. And the vast majority of people live their day-to-day lives motivated negatively, motivated by hell, motivated, like I said, they want to show up on time to their job so that they don't get in trouble, not so that they can do a better job of their job, right? And when you're in hell, when you're just trying to escape problems and you're trying to go to the gym, not to be optimally healthy, but to stop being unhealthy, right? That's a very powerful motivating force. And that's wonderful because that's where we all have to start. But once you do that for long enough and you begin to kind of claw your way out of hell, then all of a sudden, instead of just being consumed by the fact that you're in pain and everything sucks, you have extra capacity and that energy within you is freed to then begin directing it somewhere else. And you go, well, where do I want to, I have excess right now. I'm not just trying to survive all the time. Where do I want to direct this? And then you can begin creating a vision. And a lot of people have a tough time making that shift because if you've been, let's say, working your ass off at your job because you're terrified of being poor and you now finally have money, now all of a sudden you're making, whatever money you're making, that motivation of being afraid of not being poor, that's not there anymore.
So you're not driven to do your work anymore.
So you just kind of stop working. And everything starts to fall apart. And then what happens is you begin to manifest in the real world that fear of being poor, right? So then you have to start working again. Then you get afraid of being poor and you go through that cycle again and again. And what you have to do when you get to that point where you're no longer afraid of hell, where you're like, well, I'm not poor anymore. Why would I bother? Like, what's my motivation for working so hard? I can't find motivation to keep working so hard. This is a super common problem among successful people. It's like, well, you need to put together a very detailed, very specific, very exciting vision of what heaven looks like, and remind yourself of it and visualize it and imagine being there. Imagine walking around in that world. Imagine what your car feels like, how your conversations with your wife go, what your bank account looks like. Imagine all the most minute detail you possibly can. And you will begin to be motivated so powerfully by that vision that you won't have to try to keep working hard. Whatever it takes to get to that vision will begin to become your natural behavior. Right. So rather than being driven by forcing yourself to do the things that escape the hell, you begin to naturally emulate the behavior of somebody walking towards heaven. And it's a completely, it's like the nervous system and the chemicals our bodies release when we're being hunted versus when we're hunting, when we're prey versus when we're predators. It's a very similar profile, but it's a profoundly different experience. Right. And that's kind of the same in this case, right? Where it's like, it might look kind of the same on the outside, but it's such a almost opposite internal process, and it's a profoundly more rewarding way to live.
I love that. It's very good. We're at our hour, I guess, but so we're probably going to have you back on. But
I'd love that. Yeah.
I would like to thank you for walking down this path ahead of me and helping guide me along this way, because a lot of people know, I was an alcoholic. A lot of the most important thing that you've taught me is to go into those painful places and figure out what lie is corrupting the rest of my life.
Mhm.
Right. And, you know, now I'm 11 months sober and have a lot better life than I've ever thought I would, even though I think from the outside, a lot of people see me as very successful, and maybe I am, but that didn't feel that way. Right. It certainly didn't feel that way. It was a very miserable place. Zach knows how low I was at certain points over my life. And I think people need to take what you're doing seriously, because I remember when you first told me that you were going to become a life coach, I was like, really, man? Like, that's okay. Like, have you thought this through? Like, it didn't seem like, you know, it didn't seem like the best idea, to be honest, especially with how successful you were in finance. And then to have you say, well, why don't you let me try it on you? And being such good friends that I let you. And I probably would never have done that with anyone if it wasn't for the fact that, you know, we had the closeness and friendship. And now seeing the results in my own life have been quite extraordinary. So yeah, so I wanted to thank you for that, but I also wanted to give you a chance to leave the listeners with something about what you're trying to offer the world, and maybe like one phrase that transformed your life.
What I'm trying to offer the world is, I want my mission in life is to create an army of sovereign men who can then go out and increase the strength and freedom that the rest of the world experiences. And Asher, not right now. No. Asher, stop. I am, but you're distracting me. Thank you. If I showed you the note he just showed me, you would laugh. Sorry about that. No. Asher, I need you to not distract me right now. Thank you. If you want to edit that out or whatever.
No, we will.
Okay, so I'll just start again. Somebody.
It also could be good content. You know,
it could be good too.
I kind of want to leave it in, if I'm being honest.
He's still looming in my peripheral. But yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want to give to the world, and that's what motivates me on a daily basis. Where even when I'm not feeling good and I'm tired, it's like that vision that I have is so powerful and so motivating, and I'm so drawn to it that I can't stop but work. And by going through this process myself, you know, I took a broken marriage into an incredible marriage. I took kids that I tried to manage out of the way to kids that I'm present with. I moved to a new city that I absolutely love and I'm thriving in, and all the things that I was afraid of, like, you know, going to a new city, starting a new job, like I'm making more money than I've ever made, which is incredible to me. I never thought I would get here this quickly, and I'm happy and I'm fulfilled, and I'm happy in a way where, like, I thought a 10 out of 10 happiness was like what I would now consider like a 5 out of 10 happiness. Like, I just didn't know it could be this good. And if I can share that with 1 or 2 people a year, I will die a super happy man. But I definitely fucking intend on sharing that with a lot more than that. So
yes, good. So where can people find you, Matt?
At The Better Career Guy, and I'm on, like I said, I'm just starting the social media thing, so bear with my content as it improves over time. I'm a white belt at content, but I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. Matt Enns, The Better Career Guy.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Matt, for all you're doing for the world, for what you've done in my life, and for being a good friend. I
appreciate it. Hey, you are the best, and yeah, the honor you gave me, as you know, letting me test out my new career on you. Yeah, seriously, a total honor. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great our country is.